What's up, nerds? This is MonsterKoala, and today I'm here to bring you all the new content springing up around Terminus. This is Tavern Talk episode 33 with my friend Rezum After Sex.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Rezum After Sex here. Great to be back doing another episode. Let's get to it.
Alright, so we'll start off with our Dev Watch, and first we have the June newsletter. With this newsletter we had a whole bunch of stuff, but we are going to start off with the class reveals. Rezum, do you want to start off talking about the Warrior? I know you're super excited about it.
Oh yeah, once they released the Warrior, I read about it. I just fell in love. One thing that I really appreciate is you can break up classes and races to have a different dynamic, which we'll go into here in just a little bit. But let me kind of give you an example. So for me, I'm going to be a Halfling Warrior. So my build, because historically the Halfling, it has been really high in dexterity and agility, but it really lacks constitution and strength. So when I was going through the abilities, I was reading, I was like, what is my staple going to be? Am I going to try to make up lost ground, or am I just going to try to, almost like a max min type of scenario? But since I'm real high in agility, one specific spell that I like is Banner of Arms. It gives you a higher probability of dodge and parry, while also increasing your heal intake that you get from the healers in your squad. That I was really excited about. They also have some really cool banners that they can drop. For me specifically, I really like the banner that increases my accuracy. Since I'm not really big on strength and I'm more towards dexterity, every hit I can get has a chance of proccing a crit, which I am going to be all about doing as a warrior. I'm going two-hand. I'm not doing the sword and board like most people may be doing, and I'm going to try to gain aggro through some of the damage that I'm doing with my crit procs. And the last banner that I really want to pick is going to be Banner of Onslaught. What it does, it increases my critical strike damage as well as my melee damage. So it's just going to be a staple for my build having these three abilities. I know that you, MK, you're going to be doing a Dwarf Warrior, is that correct?
Yeah, and with my Dwarf Warrior, I'm going to be doing sword and board or hammer and board, hopefully. And so with me, what I'll probably do, just depending, I think that the banners for tank will be a little bit more situational. If we're having a hard time with hard-hitting stuff, we'll use the Shieldman's banner. I'll probably have at least one more banner just in case. So, I'll probably have Rallying Banner if we have a fight, if I know that we have a fight coming up that will have a whole bunch of CC on us, or if we need to have our CC last longer. Then again, I do like the idea of the Challenger's Banner. Being a mana battery is awesome for anybody, and I think those are the two that I'd carry around, the Shieldman's Banner and the Challenger's Banner.
But you see, what I find most interesting is we're both the exact same class, but we're finding different value in different spells that they're willing to offer us, depending on our race and our playstyle. So, the fact that Pantheon's bringing diversity to the class, I just love it.
Yeah, me too. And I'd like to give a shout out to one of our brothers over at the VOT, Herger. I've talked to him quite a bit about this kind of stuff. So he says that the warrior's personal DPS may not be that high when going into a DPS or maybe off-tank type of role. But if you parse the damage in his Banner of Arms and Banner of Onslaught, create his Conquest and his Conquest formation, gives melee and casting haste. It's damage plus benefits as well. The Rallying Banner can also add damage, since most classes do 0 damage while being controlled. Dot classes not so much, but everyone else. So
that's a really good point.
Yeah. He also says that a main tank warrior won't have room to run any of those banners, though. You're going to need your staples. You're going to need your threat generation, your mitigation. I know that they're going to have shield abilities and stuff like that. Probably a lot more than we see right here even. But what's interesting with a character like yours is that while we will still have 2 warriors in the group potentially, you're going to have so much more utility and so much more ability to keep your skill slots open for the group rather than me, where I'm going to need, probably my set 8 or set 10 and then I'll have 2 to play around with or whatever, which is fine with me. But I think that this, especially with the information that we have now, really works with both the Dire Lord and the Warrior. We might talk a little bit more about it when we come to the Dire Lord. So say we have a main tank, which is me maybe, and if I were tanking in a caster heavy DPS group, I'll have to load all of my hate loading utility just because they're going to be doing tons of damage, and especially the healers are going to be healing, generating too much threat, especially if I'm not tanky enough. He's saying that my loadout will be far from static. It'll all incredibly depend on who I'm running with and what exactly we're doing. I do want to say something about that I'm really excited about with the Warrior, which is battering ram. So the text for this is: you summon your immense physical strength and rush forward, breaking through certain barriers in the environment that have grown weak and unstable. The higher your strength, the more types of barriers you'll be able to break through. I think this is awesome. A little bit of utility, kind of in a similar vein as the use rope, but it's a little bit more straightforward. I don't know exactly how it's going to work. Like if these barriers are going to be super obvious, and the only real barrier that we have to breaking down that barrier is whether or not we have a high enough strength. I would think that they would, keep it hidden, make them a little bit of a secret as far as what we can and can't break down. But I'm super excited to see how they use that and what little secrets we'll be unlocking just for being a warrior.
You see, I like your thought process on that, because when I first read it, I was thinking barriers like tables and chairs that you have not been able to go through in past MMOs, and you might get 1 or 2 cast on you before you can get around that table to get to the mob. I was thinking you can go straight through that table, hit the mob, and then, you're on him, you're starting your taunts, you're starting your damages, your stuns, stuff like that. So I didn't even think of it being like a door that you could physically break through to get to another sector of the dungeon.
Yeah, I think it could be used either way. Like you said, closing gaps or coming up to new exciting parts of the dungeon, or finding hidden treasure or a secret boss or something like that. And I think that, especially with the lore speculation video that I'm doing coming up, I have another bit of evidence that we're going to see something like that, not with the warrior, but we're going to see more of stuff like that in the game. But I'll save that for that. All right. Let's move on to the Paladin. So for me, the Aegis abilities are super interesting to me with the Paladin. I wonder if these will be more like stances than anything we've seen. I know that they've said that anything like stances in this game is going to be not like warrior stance dancing back in Warcraft. You're not going to have a stance requirement for anything. So I'm not, in order to use my slam ability, I'm not going to have to be in berserker stance or anything like that. It's literally just going to be passive abilities or passive effects that are on this stance that you activate, and it's not going to change anything else.
Yeah, I always saw them as more situationally based. It wasn't, okay, I'm using this stance to do more tankiness, I'm using this one to do more DPS, I'm doing this one for more off-tanking. It was more like, if this happens, this is what you can use to get out of it.
Absolutely. I am also excited about the Venger hymns. I'm wondering if this is a little preview on the cleric. Hopefully they don't directly carry over, but seeing more hymns like this in the cleric would be cool, I think.
Oh yeah, definitely. For me, I'm excited about the Ever songs. I like the idea that they're using the combo system like we did see with the monk, kind of bleeding it into the paladin a little bit, where one spell effect will affect another one in a positive manner. When I used to play the paladin, I would use my healing spells actually as an additional way to hold aggro, so I didn't need to consistently taunt. I could taunt, group heal, and that group heal may be the equivalent of 2 or 3 taunts. And that would be my way of holding aggro, so I like these Ever songs to use as that kind of same concept and mechanic.
How do you see the Paladin being different as far as from one character to the other? We have 3 different Aegis here. He has, or 4 different Aegis rather. He has abilities called the Fiery Aegis, the Wrathful Aegis, the Brilliant Aegis, the Golden Aegis. The first one is you send a wall of celestial flame rushing forward, purging you of all poison and disease effects and knocking down all enemies in its path up to X meters. and it generates wrath, which all of these but the Golden Aegis generate wrath. So I see that as just a utility. Either DPS or tank could use it. And then the Wrathful Aegis, you radiate celestial flame that burns and laps your enemies, generating X hate every second for all enemies within Y meters of you. That definitely a tank thing. You know, you have hate generation. That's what you want there. And then Brilliant Aegis, you release a concentrated burst of celestial light, blinding your enemies for X duration. This ability can also serve as a brief light source in atmospheres of supernatural darkness. So that one, again, it's pretty much utility. I would see a Paladin who's maybe considers himself DPS and utility, using, like, having Fiery Aegis and Brilliant Aegis on his hotbar, but not Wrathful Aegis for sure. And then you have Golden Aegis. You consolidate celestial light around yourself in a sheer barrier, making you invulnerable to all damage for a short time. And that uses 1 reckoning point. So I don't really see as much of a choice with a Paladin. And I think maybe I just need to look into it a little bit more. What do you think, Bob?
Yeah, when I first read it, I actually saw nothing but choices. Did you want to main tank through aggro taunts? Did you want to main tank aggro taunts and heals? Did you want to main tank through utility abilities and taunts? I mean, I see your point, but I guess I broke it down more towards it gives the player more opportunity to thrive by play style rather than class style.
Oh, okay. So what I was looking for was different roles, but what you're saying is that with the Paladin, you're going to be able to choose your playstyle of tanking.
Correct.
But maybe you won't be able to fill the role of an off-tank or DPS utility, is what you're saying.
Well, when I see the way Pantheon is being created, I actually take the word off-tank completely off the table. And I'll get into that a little bit, like once we finish up our Dire Lord discussion, on exactly why and my meaning and thoughts behind it. But yeah, I mean, I don't see them as main tank, off-tank. I see them as they're both tanks. And how are they going to thrive both being tanks?
Okay, very cool. Alright, so let's move on then to the Dire Lord. Maybe we'll get a little bit more of example for that in the Dire Lord.
Absolutely.
So what I'm most interested in with the Dire Lord is how different each one could potentially be. For example, ogres have a higher constitution, and maybe they'll be better tanks because the mitigation is largely for the Dire Lord in regeneration and gaining that health back. And then with the Scar, who have a higher agility, who potentially will have a higher agility, they might get crit bonuses depending on how those stats are going to work. And then another thing that interests me about this, and I think lends a little bit more proof to the Dire Lord's overarching potential, is the fact that he can use one-handed edged and two-handed edged weapons. He can dual wield with those one-handed edged weapons. And it says, Dire Lords receive a bonus to critical strike chance when wielding one-handed edged weapons, and a bonus to critical strike damage when wielding two-handed edged weapons. I think that's cool. I don't exactly know how it's going to play into the game as of right now. I think it definitely kind of gives us more of an idea of how they're thinking of these classes being different from character to character. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, let's not forget the fact that this Dire Lord also has great resistances to magic. Because, I mean, if we take a look at all the tanks, depending on what we're coming up against, that's what's going to kind of dictate which tank is going to initiate the encounter. And during a specific, I know in past MMOs, what we've seen, I mean, we just got done talking about it. You either see a 100% main tank and the other is an off tank. But it's nice to see in Pantheon what we're going to see is more of a encounter-specific strategy. I mean, I love the abilities that the Dire Lord has. I mean, sharing damage with another group member, I mean, that gives you kind of that idea of off-tank, but he's still going to be that main tank type of scenario whenever he gets up to that that magical casting DPS individual. So, I mean, if you're looking for kind of a solid off-tank, Dire Lord might be the option, but, I mean, let's take a look at all of these tanks combined. How are they going to synergize together? I mean, one thing I noticed when going through all these spells and abilities was the possibility for this mechanic called a switch. I know that a lot of the new players are not 100% familiar with what a switch is, so let me explain it to you. A switch is where you have more than one tank in the group. The first tank initiates the encounter, and once that tank starts falling a little low on life, he switches out, and the other tank in the group that tanks over the encounter. And I think we're going to start seeing that a lot more in Pantheon than we have in our current games that we've been playing. I mean, I used to do it in EverQuest, I used to do it in EQOA, but ever since then, I haven't really had that mechanic. So let's take a Paladin and a Warrior in the same group. The Warrior may step up first, take that initial damage. The Paladin then steps in once the Warrior gets weak. The Paladin's using his taunts, but also his heal abilities, which is healing the Warrior. Once the Warrior's all back up to full health, he steps back in to take over that encounter, and your probability of dying becomes, diminished by at least 50%, half of what it used to be, if you can use that mechanic properly. And I see that setup being implemented into Pantheon.
I certainly agree. I remember using those techniques in vanilla WoW, and then basically after that, you didn't see it until raid, and that only made sense because you were bringing 40 people into the raid itself. So, yeah, I'm super excited for that. One thing that I was going to say about the Dire Lord is with that being able to take damage for other people, you could even, with the Dire Lord, open up the possibilities of what you can take into a dungeon or an encounter. So maybe when you do have need for an off-tank for adds or whatever, or just a second tank, you can apply your mitigation abilities that work on another player to kind of create an off-tank where you wouldn't have one. Maybe.
Yeah, almost like the monk. I mean, if the Dire Lord put that spell on the monk is taking that damage. The Dire Lord's taking damage too, which is actually increasing his health regen and the damage that he's doing. When he steps up to bat, when the monk's like, hey, you guys, I'm stepping out, Dire Lord's like, well, I'm stepping up, and he's just pop, 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 pop. He's ready to hit the ground running.
Hell yeah. Okay, so one thing that I've seen people, there's differing opinions on is the Dire Lord's armor. So the Dire Lord can use cloth, leather, and mail armor. And simply because he's a tank, a lot of people don't like that. What do you think, bud?
I've always seen stronger stats on medium to light armor compared to your plate armor pieces, especially when it comes to things like dexterity and agility, which I think are going to play into the Dire Lord's favor a little bit. So, I see no problem with it. And, like it says, the passive ability, the more damage he takes, the more life he loses, the stronger he becomes. So, you almost want to, he's going to be teetered with a little bit with the healers out there in the world. Like, I'm going to make you live at 50%. Trust me, I won't let you die. But as far as the armor goes, it's not a huge deal to me. What about you?
I think that anybody who has a problem with this is... I don't want to say silly. I don't want to alienate anybody by saying the word silly. But I think that something like the Dire Lord, it totally works with just leather and mail. Or even just, if they had just left leather and no mail, I would have been fine with that. Because the Dire Lord reminds me of a berserker who is frothing at the mouth and red in the eye and just willing to do anything to get in. And he's not going to want the extra weight and the extra bulk and clunkiness of plate armor because he needs to be fast. He needs, especially just in his individual attacks, he needs to make sure that he's getting those in so that he can drain that essence and keep himself going. And I don't know. I think a lot of people who have the issue with this is just the fact that he's a tank and just the fact that aesthetically he's not going to be wearing plate armor. I think that, if...
either.
Yeah, if that's your issue, like, open your mind a little bit, Tanks don't have to be covered in plate. They're cool, but if you want to be covered in plate, if you want to have a shield, go with Warrior, which, is obviously the best class of these three. But... You also have the Paladin, who is very cool in his own right. So yeah, you have so many options with this, and even if you don't like that, you can always go with the cleric, who we know is going to be wearing plate and that plate raiment, which I'm so excited about.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The one thing I wanted to touch on was we know that our weapons are going to affect the mobs differently, depending if it's like, let's say, a blunt on a skeleton. We know it's going to do more damage than a piercing on a skeleton. Maybe they're planning on implementing the same system for the players. So maybe the Dire Lord, who has the chain and mail, won't take as big damage to slashing, and he already has a resistance to magic. I mean, he may have the upper hand in almost every battle compared to Paladin and the Warrior. Who knows?
I mean, that would be cool, using those weaknesses and strengths. I think
And maybe
I didn't even
his
think of that.
armor is lighter too, he could be attacking quicker. We just don't know what full mechanics they're planning on implementing into this game.
Yeah, I think the main thing to think about for the Dire Lord is that his mitigation is through attack. His best defense is his attack. That is what a Dire Lord is. That's the definition of a Dire Lord. Your best defense is attack.
And if he had plate on, he couldn't bleed all over everybody, so that's why he has to wear mail.
Exactly. Oh man, I'm so excited about that. Bleeding all over everybody, the caustic, giving it caustic properties, it's ridiculous.
Oh, I know, it's cool.
All right, moving on. So the first tweet that we have here, VR, kind of goes into this actually. The first tweet is, what type of gear do you typically favor, light, medium, or heavy, and why? What do you think, Bud?
I mean, I'm a warrior, so warriors are traditionally heavy, so I mean, I'm going to say plate armor for myself, but it doesn't mean that I wouldn't wear light or medium, because I used to play Elder Scrolls where you could mix and match everything, and depending on what you had, opened up different abilities, different options. So, but I guess in games like Pantheon, the old traditional games, since I'm a tank, I'm going to be going heavy.
Cool. This question for me spoke aesthetics mainly, and I think that's what most people answered with. So for me personally, I think that you can get cool with any kind of armor, but I like heavy armor. I like the way it looks. I've always been in love with the depiction of a knight, you know, and just being able to take everything without actually being hurt, and then on top of that looking just super, super cool whenever you're doing it. And then, of course, I'm a big fan of a shield. I just like the aesthetics of a shield. I think that, you know, tactically it plays very well, and then also it just looks super cool. You got a big plane that you can just put anything on. A dragon, a maw, a turtle if you want, whatever. I think that aesthetically, heavy armor, shields, that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I mean, back in the day, like, I used to go sword and board all the time, but I just love the concept that came up with the halfling so much that I have to find something that fits with that class and that race. And I think it's going to be the two-hand sword for me, even though, I mean, I love sword and board. I love the way it looks. Since I'm going to be avoiding damage altogether, I think the two-hand is the way I got to go.
Awesome. Okay, so the next one, they give us a scenario. You're happily camping on a named mob after waiting patiently to get the camp from someone else. Along comes a random player who just starts competing for the named spawn. You ask them to stop and they ignore you. What do you do? What do you do, Rezum?
What do I do? Okay.
Yeah, what do you do?
Player meant one person in mind. And if I remember correctly, Pantheon's going to be also incorporating a old method of mentoring. But they're going to do it the right way in this game. That I know. Mentoring's been a just disaster in the past. So Pantheon, please do it right. But anyways, if it's one player, I'm not going to do any of these. I'm not going to train him, report him, log off, or find something else to do. I'm going to invite him to my party. We're going to get down together. He must be really good if he's able to take this thing on himself. So I'd rather have him in my group.
No, I 100% agree with that. So the results we have here, as of me writing these down, and I think that the polls have ended. So anyway, 49% of people said train them, 26% said report them, 5% said log off, 20% said find something else to do.
0.1 said invite them to the group.
Well, I would think that anybody who would invite them to their group would vote in the train them category. Right.
Oh, absolutely.
So
You can't beat 'em.
yeah, I think that's what I would do as well. Just group up with them, make sure that you both get the mob, and I think that's the best way to do it. If that doesn't work, if the guy who is there is just not responding to you, not accepting your request, then personally, I gotta find something else to do. I'm not gonna sit there and wait just
Yeah, no, I
to
completely
do
agree.
nothing. And with Pantheon, I don't think we're gonna have a problem with finding something else to do, even just a little bit down the way.
And if they can solo that name mob, training them probably isn't going to have any effect. You're just going to one or two hit them anyway.
Right. Maybe you'll get into a situation where they'll train you.
There you go.
Yeah. All right. So the next one, do you use add-ons? So these include DPS and aggro meters, healer helpers, etc. in other MMORPGs, and if so, what do you like about them? For the poll, we had 58% said, yes, I use add-ons. 14% said, no, I don't use them. 11% said, don't care either way. And 17% said, hate them with a vengeance. What do you think, bud?
Well, I mean, myself, I've never really used them in the past. And honestly, I think it hurts a game more than it helps it. It turns it into this DPS output game. And that's what we've seen with World of Warcraft, especially recently, where the solo focus is based on how much damage can people do. I mean, if you were going to do a cool mechanic like this in the game, let's say you had two rogues in the group. I say pit those two rogues against each other, not rogue versus warrior versus wizard versus ranger. It just gets too messy that way. Two rogues going up against each other, I think that'd be a cool scenario for myself. I mean, I guess I would be voting don't care either way. Actually, no, don't use them. That's what I'm voting.
Oh, okay. So for me, especially in Warcraft, I used so many add-ons. And my thing about add-ons is that with a game like Warcraft, you have so many abilities that you can choose from at any given time. You can put, your food in your bar, you can put your potions, you can put your mounts, you can do whatever you need. So personally, as a Warcraft player, I needed multiple bars. I needed to manage them and put them where I needed them to be so that I could get the most out of my playstyle. I also, one of my favorite add-ons for Warcraft was called Carbonite, and the reason for that is it was a map overhaul, which worked a lot like Google Maps, where I could set waypoints. My favorite thing to use it for was gathering, because I could load in all the nodes that were already known. And then all I had to do was load up the ore nodes if I was mining, and I would get on my flying mount, and literally Carbonite would draw a line between each one of them. And as I got to one, it would check off that waypoint and move on to the next one. That made farming so much easier, but given that was a response to how Warcraft does things. And I think that's a lot of what add-ons are used for. Like you were saying, the DPS competition is nuts, and it always has been in Warcraft, and especially more recently. And so you're going to need those DPS meters. And I as a tank, past maybe Wrath of the Lich King, I didn't find myself using a threat meter because I didn't need it. Because it was so easy to hold threat, it didn't matter.
Absolutely. And I like the add-ons that you had talked about. I played Elder Scrolls for a little bit. One add-on they had that I actually liked was finding herbs and crafting items. But the catch was you had to find it first, mark it yourself. It wasn't just like a cheat sheet map or anything like that. So I could go as far as doing something like that. But yeah, I mean, like you said, the aggro meters, the DPS meters, it just floods the chat too. It's like, haha, I did better than you. And I feel like it crippled a lot of the classes because they try to make them as close as possible. We have to make the wizard and the rogue do the exact same amount of damage for the players to be happy. Or the ranger will say, well, I'm not doing enough. I need to do more. And then you ruin the ranger class because maybe that's not how Pantheon's envisioning the ranger to be, this ultimate DPS. He's a utility class. I just don't want add-ons to ruin the experience of what they're wanting to build.
Yeah, and just for one more example of that, I remember in Wrath of the Lich King when gear score as an add-on became a requirement for raiding, and people would not take you if you were underneath a certain gear score, and that was an average of the gear that you had on and the gear in your pack. So being a role player, I couldn't hold my role play stuff to be able to get into role play because it would mess up my gear score. And that's
crazy.
It was so frustrating to even if I took those out, the gear score didn't change all that much. I mean, it bumped it up just a little bit more, and it's the same in Warcraft. In Warcraft, they put the gear score add-on in to the game several years ago, and they legitimized the the discrimination. It was very hard for somebody who hadn't gotten into a raid before to get into a raid because they didn't have any raid gear. It sucked. It really sucked.
Absolutely.
And I mean, that's an example of one of those add-ons that didn't seem to affect the game in any way, affecting the game heavily to the point that they incorporated the add-on itself into the game. And it made the game so much more superficial. It made the game worse overall. And I think that those things are hard to catch. That has got to be super hard to catch for a company. And I don't know how to mitigate that.
Point, the game is playing the player, and the player is no longer playing the game.
Exactly.
I do not want to see that happen. I'd rather bring somebody who's 3 levels lower, who has great skill, than somebody 3 levels higher who kind of knows what they're doing. And I think that's what Pantheon's trying to do as well. They want to bring talented players to the group instead of it just being, oh, well, you know what, you have this much gear point, you have these skills, let's bring you on board. It's like, well, are you that good? Like, I need some good people.
And that's something that I'm a tad bit worried about with Pantheon. I'm kind of afraid that the skill floor is going to be so high that, especially with these new generation of players who just kind of want to get in and do rather than research and do your best, I'm just a little bit worried about how successful that's going to be.
Your point is very valid, but I think you'll be surprised how many older players are willing to teach, as to where if you were to log into World of Warcraft today, it's like, haha, noob, you suck, get out of my group. As to where in Pantheon, I think that the older players are going to say, hey, you really messed up there. Let me teach you how to do it a little bit better. Let me teach you how to play your class if you really want to know what to do. If you want to be invited into prestigious guilds and get a reputation for being a good player.
Yeah, I really hope that the community pulls through on that, and I really hope that Pantheon gives us some tools to affect that in a positive way,
Absolutely.
So now we'll move on to the Community Watch. First up on the Community Watch, maybe as always, I don't know, is Voices of Terminus. Since the last Tavern talk, they have released one episode. It's the number 124, Mechanics, Deities. So in this episode, the VOD crew talks about deities, how they were implemented in EQ 1 and 2, and how they would work best in Pantheon.
Yeah, I mean, this ended up being a really fascinating episode, in my opinion. And it actually created a lot of creative sparks in my head. I mean, because I remember back in EverQuest 2 when deities were first introduced, and how the feeling of unsatisfaction lingered in my experience around deities. It was a feeling of unresolved. You went ahead and finished this quest line that, kind of encountered with a god. You received this little cosmetic pet. It had nothing more than like a resistance. I mean, it didn't have a tailored AA tree. It had nothing. I mean, if you want to hear some good creative talk around deities, some directions that Pantheon could go that are, gorgeous ideas, I would say check out this episode. It's actually really fascinating, really interesting, and you learn a little bit about the history of deities and other MMOs.
Absolutely. I'm kind of hoping that they almost have their own faction where, you hold favor with your god, or your god dislikes what you're doing, depending on which one you choose. I'm really excited to hear more about this from VR because, personally for me, there's going to be a ton of lore in it because I need to know what these pantheons consist of. The human pantheon, the Archai Pantheon. You know, those are just two examples of we only know of one god, and those were previous gods from each pantheon. So hopefully we get something from VR about this. But like Rezum said, this is a fantastic episode. I very much enjoyed it.
And I like the idea that you brought up about faction. I mean, I guess depending on who your deity is, who your god that you're praying to is, may open up different quest lines for you too, and shut down others for those who don't have the same alignment of deity as you. I mean, let's put it into real terms. Let's say we're back in the time of Christ, okay? So you have the Christians and you got the Muslim. Let's say we're all in Israel together. All right, so let's say I'm a Christian and my mom's sick and I need a watcher, but I need someone to go get medicine. If there was a Muslim that walked by, there's no way that I would have asked him, hey, can you go get my mom medicine? He's like, you're a Christian, I want nothing to do with you. And I probably wouldn't even ask him. I'd be like, ooh, you know what? I'm going to wait for somebody else to walk by before I offer him that quest to go do. So, I mean, the faction idea, opening up quests, closing down quests, I mean, it's certainly viable.
Yeah, and in that vein, it'll really flesh out what these pantheons and these gods mean to each, especially area of the world. So if I'm a follower of the Seven God and I'm walking through Thronefast, am I going to get the same kind of quests that somebody who is a follower of the God of Light, whoever that may be, which is not a god in Pantheon? I'm just giving a general example. Very most likely, I'm not going to get nearly as many quests in Thronefast as my friend who is a follower of the God of Light, just because, for one, this isn't a human god that I'm worshipping, and then secondly, nobody worships the same god that I do.
So maybe you'll find a secret cult in Thronefast that will teach you this cool ability or skill that you didn't have before, that they've been learning and mastering in the depths of the sewers, that nobody else would be able to get because they're all Thronefast lovers and Thronefast followers.
Oh, that prospect excites me so much. I love hidden cults. They're amazing.
Yeah.
I'm so excited about that. Thank you for saying that.
Woohoo!
All right, so let's move on to Sacred. Sacred's released 2 videos since the last Tavern Talk. So the first one is Let's Talk Pantheon, episode 39, All Things in Time, where he and Dayhawk speculate on what might be coming next for Pantheon. They definitely talk about the next class reveal a little bit, but there are some more in-depth things that they talk about there. Definitely worth checking out. And then they have Let's Talk Pantheon episode 40, Tank Thoughts, where Sacred and Dayhawk go over the newsletter and give some thoughts and speculation about its contents.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I can appreciate from this episode that they touched on is the fact that we see from these class reveals, it's not just, I mean, that's not the whole buffet we're getting, guys. It's just a little appetizer. So you know that we're getting banners, you know that we're getting ever songs, and you know that we're getting cool passes. But how far can these abilities go? Like, maybe they're going to make a banner that increases avoidance. I mean, it just gives you a good platform and a good basis for us to be able to theory craft off of. But I know that a lot of people were offset, being like, I don't like what they've given me. Well, guys, don't worry. This is just a taste. This is not the entire course. I mean, Pantheon is trying to be, trendsetters. They're not trying to be sheep to the shepherd. When I theory craft Pantheon, I try to forget about every game I've ever played, as hard as it is to do. It's damn near impossible. But when I theorycraft Pantheon, I think, Pantheon, what is Pantheon trying to go for? How do I theorycraft off of what I know, instead of what I've known from other games? Because we don't want to play a remask of a game that we have dropped. We want to play a brand new game with stuff we haven't seen before.
And I don't know about you, but I think that VR has been very transparent with that specifically. I don't think that we need to worry about that. And hopefully that's become a natural thing to you, what you were saying about theory crafting with Pantheon and not thinking about what you've experienced before. Do you feel like that's a natural thing now, given what VR has told us is important to them?
No, I mean, I still think that, well, at least a lot of the people that I've talked to, they relate Pantheon to other games they've played. I mean, I do the exact same thing. It's not a bad thing. It is what it is, because I mean, we craft off of what we know instead of crafting off of brand new ideas that don't exist yet.
Right.
What about yourself?
I agree with you. Just being a gamer, for 20 years, it's certainly difficult not to compare everything that we have done before to upcoming things. The idea that nothing new can be done because we've been going over this for so much time, I think it's easy to fall into that. But given what we've gotten from Pantheon and VR, I think it's a little bit easier to be excited for new things for sure, especially if you've been following this coverage as closely as we have. You know how involved with the community Pantheon and VR are. And then you also, you've heard everything that they've said and know that they're really on the same page as we are. They know that we don't want the same thing that we've gotten before, and they know that we want new things, but in a similar vein that we've seen before. So I think it is a little bit easier, a little bit more natural for us, the people who have followed this game, to not worry about that as much. Although it is definitely, for me personally, something in the back of my mind, just kind of worried about it. But it's getting a lot easier as we move on. And we will continue to move on. So, Cleese, he has released 3 new videos. So you have Green Chat 23, which is Q&A with a new exciting feature. I don't want to spoil that for you, so go check it out. And then he has Green Chat number 24, Pantheon tank class reveals, my opinions, and which one is right for you. In this, Cleese goes over the 3 tank class reveals in the newsletter and gives his tank on each. Be careful, he curses like a sailor in this one. And then in number 25, he's got Pantheon tank class follow-up. So he felt that there were some questions that he could have answered in the first one that he didn't quite get to, and then he had a whole bunch of comments on his last video. So he made another video to address those in true Green Chat fashion, where he takes some questions and goes over the comments and goes a little bit more in depth in the class reveals and kind of makes sure that we know what he was getting at in the last video. Do you watch Green Chat much, Rez?
Yeah, I've seen quite a few episodes. I mean, Cleese is a funny guy, and it's an entertaining episodes, that's for sure. He covers really good stuff, and he brings to light a lot of things that you don't think of with MMOs. So yeah, I mean, I say check his channel out, subscribe to him, and you're always in for a good episode.
So one thing about Cleese, have you ever heard of, I think it's called ASMR?
I haven't heard of that.
No. All right. So ASMR is this weird group of people, I guess you could say, and they cater to people who like a very calm, slow kind of voice being portrayed to them in such a way that it's really weird. It's hard for me to explain. But basically, if you look up ASMR on YouTube, you're going to find a ridiculous amount of people who are just whispering into their cameras very slowly and methodically and with kind of a melody to it, and people really like it. And Cleese isn't exactly that, but he's as close to that as you're going to find in Pantheon. So if that's something that you're looking for, I don't know why you would, but if that's something that you're looking for in your Pantheon news, be sure to check out Cleese, because he's a super calm, not terribly whispery, but his videos would put me to sleep if I wasn't listening to what he would say. He's saying.
A very seductive voice.
Oh yeah, and that mustache really helps that out.
Without a doubt.
All right, so Pixel Debauchery, Scribble has released another long-form podcast where he interviews our very own Yarnilla and Lexer about our guild, the Voices of Terminus.
Yeah, I mean, if you've thought about joining, this is a good chance to get some information about the guild and what we're planning on getting our spinny little fingers into.
Oh yeah, especially Lexer with those bony little scar fingers.
I hear that he's a closet paladin. He's just afraid to come out.
I think that's really what it is. Isn't that how it usually goes? If you're so against something, usually you're pretty interested in it.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. All right. A little bit of a warning as well. I don't know if I said it in the last Tavern Talk, but Scribble describes his show as lewd and lascivious. So some might want to take that into consideration. I will also say that in this episode, you'll get something that we don't get to see a whole lot, which is a little bit of tired and frustrated and angry Yarnilla. Which is funny because Scribble totally isolates that part of it and has a little preamble to it and everything. It's really good. So if you guys want to see a little bit of that, in Yarnilla's defense, it is 3 a.m. whenever they're recording that. So I certainly don't blame him, but it's still kind of funny.
Oh yeah, no, Yarnilla is like the nicest guy you'll ever meet, but he also has this portrayal that if you piss him off, you're done with.
Yeah. All right, so next up is Nathan Napalm. He's released 4 videos recently. He goes over each of the tank class reveals in depth in 3 different videos and dedicates his newest video to the rogue ability to let down a rope. Something I want to point out in this, there's some super interesting art in this episode. He draws these himself, and I really like them. Like, they're simplified and rough. They kind of remind me of, like, 90s cartoons, and I think that...
I was going to say the same thing on Cartoon Network at, like, 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the stuff you used to see, and you're like, huh, this feels familiar.
Yeah, and what caught me off guard so much about this is that he had so many of them. He had something like 5 different drawings that he did to illustrate what he meant about the rogue and its rope ability and how many different ways that could be used. So Nathan, if you're listening and you don't want to do these videos anymore, do a Pantheon cartoon, man. I think that you could do it, and I think it would be awesome.
I dig it.
So in all of these 4 episodes, he's got some interesting insights on every overview, ability, and utility available to the new classes, and then that special rogue ability that I think everyone's probably very excited about.
Yeah, one thing I like, I mean, he broke it down class by class. He did one separate episode for the warrior, one separate one for the paladin, and one separate one for the dire lord. So you can really get good in-depth information in a timely manner. And one thing he does really good too, he gives you type of scenarios that you might want to use this in to really create a good creative spark.
Yes, absolutely. I love Nathan. He's a cool guy. And then next up, we have Vress. Vress is a guy who just came on my radar. He's been making content for other games for a long time. And he's made a few videos on Pantheon in the past, but he's now released 3 new videos with some lore.
Yeah, I mean, I've been digging his racial videos. I mean, it's lore pulled straight from the Pantheon website, so you know it's accurate. So, I mean, if you ever, like, I'm not a huge reader, so I love the fact that it's almost like they're putting out audiobooks for me for Pantheon. So I can just drive to work, I can put this on YouTube, and I listen to everything about the racials and, you know, the racial lure, and I even listen to the lure of the Fallen that you put out there. I mean, I love what everybody's doing with Pantheon. It gives me a meaning to drive to work in the morning.
Me too, man. So with these, like I said before, he did 3 new videos, and those are the lore of the races of Terminus. I think it's fantastic. I hope that more people will get into Pantheon, but I think that the way to do that is through the lore, because it is playing such a big role in the game itself, in the development of the game, in how we're going to experience the game when it comes out. And the fact that someone like Vress, who has so many followers and has been making videos about MMOs as a whole for such a long time, is starting to do videos about Pantheon and about the lore of Pantheon. I'm super excited about that. In each one of those videos, he's got over 1,000 views. I think one of them has over 2,000 or 3,000. And that gives us a really good, crowded, open door for Pantheon. And I think, you know, with people like me, I just don't have that much of a following because I only focus on Pantheon, and I only started doing this when I got so excited about Pantheon, which is perfectly fine. I think that the more content that we can get out there, the more people that we can get in on the party, this game's going to be so much better because of that. And you know, with these different YouTubers, they have different styles and different length of videos, and I certainly understand if somebody wouldn't want to sit there and watch or listen to me, go through every little letter that Justin has written just to extrapolate some kind of nonsense, which I very much enjoy doing, but I could totally understand how somebody would not be into that. And if that's the case, go to Vress, go to Temi, who are going to be doing these shorter videos. But even if they do longer videos, even if they do exactly what I've been doing, I think it's fantastic. And I think that what we need to be focused on is the game. And that's also why we do Tavern Talk.
Absolutely. And I mean, one thing I like is they're leading with lure and then following up with the game. Because if you don't find interest in the lure, you're probably not going to find interest in the game, because that's where the immersion comes from. Where am I in this world? What's my spot in this world? And how am I supposed to be interacting with this world? What's my story? How can I tell my story? I mean, I think it's encouraging, it's rewarding that people are taking this lure and they're taking it seriously, and they want to spread the lure around before they come out with all these cool game mechanics. Because, I mean, think about it. Class is lure. Where does your class fall in this world? Where does your race fall in this world? What's your importance? And I just think it's awesome that everybody's leading with lure first and game second.
Yeah, and if you guys are wondering how much the lore exactly plays into this, be sure to go back and watch the VOT's interview with Joppa and Istulame, or it's Justin is what it is, Justin Gerhardt from VR. He's the lore guy, and then Joppa is the main designer throughout the game. And
yeah, I laughed out loud so hard because when Yarnilla introduced him as Istulame, I started cracking up because I thought that his character's name was Is Too Lame. Yeah. I was being creative with it. I was like, I'm an idiot.
No, you're good. I had no clue who it was or what it was. But yeah, that's Justin. And if you guys, they talk at length about how much the lore is being taken into account through Joppa's job, which is making the entire game. All the mechanics of the game are informed by the lore, and they have some good discussion on that. All right, to move on, we have me. So I don't like to promote myself too much, but I thought I'd go ahead and mention that you can find in-depth lore videos on my channel. I just finished, on my channel, the same channel that this is posted to. I just finished my coverage on the Keeping of Castigue, and very soon we're going to have a speculation video on that.
And I've listened to the videos, guys. They're really good. And if you want to know some of the characters that you may be interacting with in Pantheon, listen to the lure. It's all going to make sense and pull itself together.
Oh man, I'm so excited to meet Kazas and Relsiren and Telnarsis and Ragnilthamos and all of them. That's my favorite part about reading the lore is just kind of wondering when I'm going to see these guys, how much of them I'm going to see. God, I'm just so excited. I'm so excited.
Heck yeah. I mean, Joppa answered my question, which was on the VOT episode that you were talking about. And it was, are we going to get to meet and interact with any of the characters that we're meeting in the lure? Justin couldn't say, I mean, not Justin, but Joppa couldn't say much, but he said, yes, you will. And I said, ah!
Yeah.
Lights came down from the heavens. It was great.
Well, something that I talk about in my upcoming speculation video, and I'll touch on here, is that this lore is being written with us in mind, with us interacting with the world in mind. That's what writing for a video game is. You have to keep, especially legendary stories that set up a world, you have to keep them vague, and you have to keep, everything kind of at face value until the game comes out, until you can give your players the chance to delve further into these stories and find the answers for themselves. That's what Justin's trying to do right now, is set up this world where we're asking so many questions that our brains are exploding, and he's just gonna be like, I'm sorry guys, can't give you any more than that. And really the answer that he's given us with that is that we're gonna find it in the game. And that's why he can't say anything about it. And that's why I do this lore stuff. I'm so excited about this game, is because there is so much there already, and that only paves the way for so much more. And, you know, I'm not worried about my questions not being answered to a full extent or him not being able to give me what I wanted. Because really all I did want was, I can't tell you much about that because it's going to be in the game, you know? And at least that's what that tells me, is that all of these things are going to be in the game. And that's the only way that we're going to find out about them. And I think that's the way that it should be.
Definitely, and you know that they're going to have some really good lure content quests. Because how many times can you go collect 50 pelts before you're like, oh my god, kill me now?
Oh, yeah.
I'd rather learn a little bit about the world around me.
Yeah, only
and
once
have
for me.
called on my ass.
After the first 50 pelts, I'm like, kill myself now. That's what I'm going to do. Oh, you want me to get another 50 pelts and I don't know where they're going for the economy of this region? Yeah, I'm going to shoot myself. That's what's going to happen.
Those pelts are going on the black market. It's actually an endangered species.
It would be nice if that was an option, but it never
There
is.
you go. There's some lure.
Yeah. All right. So, upcoming stuff. We are going to say that the Voices of Terminus is taking a break for the next 2 weeks. Yarnil is taking some time to get his estate in order and some real-life stuff going on. But they'll be back on the 13th at the same time, same place, Voices of Terminus. You guys know where they're at. All right, so Sacred Show, you can catch his episodes at 10:30 EST every Wednesday and Friday. And Green Chat with Cleese is weekly. Nathan Napalm makes at least one episode a week, I think. And then Vress, I think he makes an episode once a week, but not all of them is Pantheon. Be sure to subscribe to all of those guys. There are some that we mentioned last Tavern Talk that we didn't mention this Tavern Talk because they didn't have any new releases, but be sure to follow them as well. I'm sure that we'll go ahead and include everyone that we can in the links in the show notes. And now for forum check. We didn't have much on the forums this month, save for newsletter discussions, which are pretty easy to find. So you guys go check those out. I did want to bring your guys' attention to a thread in the off-topic discussions forum by a guy named Zootastic. So it's entitled, I Do Miss Diplomacy, where he talks about the diplomacy feature in Vanguard. Kilson did post in this saying that it isn't related to Pantheon in any way, which is why it's in the off-topic section. Either way, I didn't play Vanguard. I didn't even know about it before Pantheon, actually. But the system seems interesting to me. While it's not going to be in Pantheon, I think it's good to kind of see where these guys have been before. And with Vanguard, I actually don't know if there's anybody who had worked on Vanguard in VR other than Brad McQuaid. But it was an interesting read to me just to see where VR is coming from. And there's a few threads about that. And then on Reddit, they're by Tabobsta.
I think it's the Bobsta.
Yeah, he's got the TEH instead of THE, which always messes me up. But we'll have it up on screen so you guys can see the spelling. This thread he entitles, "What are the small practical nuances you find refreshing in a game?" He mentions being able to stow your weapons, especially when a scabbard is included. And he would like to know if anyone else has some ideas. And some other suggestions in the thread includes rogues having a hooded cloak, which we've already seen in the game. The problem with that is, though, that all we've really seen is static armor. We haven't really seen the armor for each race change. If you've noticed the ogre, he always has that armor from his concept art, and then the same thing with the gnome. I haven't seen them in-game look any different from that. So I don't know if that's actually something that's going to be in the game. The fact that rogues only have hooded cloaks would be cool. Some other suggestions are dire lords being covered in blood after battle, and feet lining up with steps as you walk up them, things like that. Is there anything like that that you're interested in, Rez?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the beauties in the small details. For me, it's things like leaves falling from trees, the grass blowing in the wind, the flowers' petals falling, weather, like little bits of rain, snow. For me, it's more about environment. Because, I mean, that's what I'm diving into. That's where my immersion comes from. So things like that is what the little nuances for me. How about yourself?
I think that those things are very important as well. A much more realistic environment makes me much more easily immerse myself into the game.
I think
really,
music is a really important nuance as well.
oh yeah, and we know with what we've been shown that Pantheon's going to have some amazing graphics as far as the environment goes, some amazing lighting, and we also know that from Joppa we're going to get some fantastic music, which you can find on SoundCloud already. So for me, it's all of those things, but I also understand what they mean when they say, Dire Lords dripping with blood and stuff like that. I would like to see little things like that, like, if my character's standing before battle, he's not going to be winded or anything like that, but then my character rushes in and kills a guy, and it would be interesting to see him, even if he does put his weapons up or whatever right after battle, him kind of breathing hard and like just kind of recovering as his mana or energy or even health goes up. Just show his recovery in a visual type way. Little things like that I don't expect, but it would be super cool, and I don't know if I can come up with any other ideas than that. The thread is very interesting as far as that goes. There are a ton of suggestions there, so you guys should take a look at that if you are interested. And that's pretty much all we got. Do you have anything else, Rez?
No, not on the plate today. I think we covered quite a bit.
We sure did. So if you guys like the show today, as always, be sure to shield bash that like button in the face. Also, subscribe to the Voices of Terminus and me, MonsterKoala, so you don't miss your source for Pantheon news.
Leave us a comment if you feel compelled, and we'll be sure to put links for everything we talked about in the description below. Peace!
See you guys later.